Welcome back, Gary.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks for having me again.
So let's revise a lot of what Rincon is, but first and foremost, just reintroduce yourself and a little bit about your role, position, and what you've been doing over the last 3 years at Rincon.
Sure. So, yes, I'm Gary Harvey and the Managing Director of Rincon Resources. Rincon has 3 projects in Western Australia where we're exploring for gold, copper, and critical minerals, basically, and that includes rare earths. Right now, over at least 6 months this year, a lot of our focus has been on the West Arunta project, and investors, if they look at our website, they'll see a presentation I gave at the beginning of the year that basically said, yes, West Arunta is going to be a focus for us this year, 2024, going into 2025. I ran through what we had and what we were doing, and that's exactly what's happening right now. So outside of that, West Arunta, our other projects haven't gone away, but we're restarting our exploration or commencing our new exploration strategy at Laverton. That gets underway now as planned. And that's going to be managed externally by a consultant to run that on our behalf, whilst us internally, our technical team, focus on doing all the things that we've been planning to do for West Arunta.
So let's start with West Arunta first and foremost, and discuss, as you said, lineage of the West Arunta package. There's a bit of history with it and the work that you've been doing up until now, and we'll talk about the results and the market reaction. But walk us through the preparation, the package, and how long it's taken you to really build up this quality asset that you're still very excited about its potentials.
We've had the project since day one. We started off with one tenement, building on the size of that package. And admittedly, it's quite hard to do that in a very contested area at the moment. So, look, when I came on board, when we started, nothing had been done, and so the first thing that had to be done was native title negotiations. So we ticked that box in 2021. 2022, we applied for and we're waiting on statutory permits. Okay, and that's a ministerial entry permit and an endorsement, right to mine endorsement, which is something that's attached to your lease that says you have a right to go and do work on the ground. So we waited some time to get that access finalised and approved, and so by the end of 2022 we were in a position to actually get on the ground and actually start doing stuff. And the first things we did were reconnaissance, rock chip sampling and mapping. Okay, and a couple of things came out of that. Was one, we got some really good rock chip samples of copper. We also identified rare earth mineralisation at Bali. Okay, and sorry, I forgot. All our initial work was at Bali. Okay, and Bali's an IACG system, so that was with known mineralisation. So that's where we started. So we did rock chip sampling. We got great rock chip results for copper, gold, silver, and we also got rare earth mineralisation. Now, I don't think anyone gave a shit about that at the time. There was zero interest. But on the back of that, we confirmed that there was indeed a large hydrothermal system present at Bali, and for all we knew at the time, it was IACG related, right? And that was based on information that had been gathered and collected historically. Okay, so that was our building block. That's where we started. Following that, we went through, or we had a complete review of all the data sets we had, and we came up with several targets at Bali that needed drill testing. At that time, all the knowledge was centred around part of the Bali system known as Bali East, right? A lot of widespread, lowish grade copper mineralisation drill holes, but certainly quite an abundance of it. And so the challenge was, okay, well, we know that's present, but there's indications of mineralisation across this entire outcropping area, right, which is spreads over 5 kilometres. Well, how extensive does that mineralisation go, right? Because hardly any work had been done outside of Bali East. So one of the aims behind our first drilling campaign, and I'll talk through that a little bit in a bit more. It was trying to understand what's the potential scale of this system. All right, if it is a big system, all right. The soil sampling, rock chip sampling suggests it is, but the drilling at this stage hasn't really confirmed that. So we wanted to. One of the aims was not only did we want to step out and try and extend on the known, okay, and get us a feel for scale, but also it's an information gathering program as well, right? What we did was, the idea was to collect as much information that would continue to help us understand what was there, because you just don't get that amount of copper mineralisation without something big driving that system, okay? As I said, like, one of the initial outcomes was that the signatures were telling us it was a large hydrothermal system. So that straight away tells us there's something big driving that. We don't know what. It took a while to get our first drilling campaign started, but ultimately that started in February this year. And we drilled 2 diamond holes, 12 RC holes. 2 diamond holes, tested a couple of deeper targets, which we're testing coincident, gravity, magnetic, a little bit of inverse polarization, anomalous, associations, but also driven by, geochemistry as well. But really, we didn't know what was really happening below. So the 2 diamond holes were ultimately going to tell us something about what was going on below. And we'd always hoped that you would intersect something of significance. And the RC, quite similar, right? We identified areas that we needed to test around the Bali area to try and answer some questions about, well, what does that mean over there? What's causing that, or what does that mean? So almost a reconnaissance style drilling program, but ultimately that was our first program. First pass, try and grow on what we know, develop some sort of ideas or of the scale of what could be there, and then collect that information and what does that tell us, all right? And we put the results of that drilling program out a couple of weeks ago, and we weren't successful in getting some really great copper intersections, but we did still intersect quite wide zones of anomalous copper across the system. So the drilling told us that yes, the system is actually quite extensive. There is a presence and extension of what outside Bali is, so that's great. So that's something to work with. 2, we did really comprehensive sampling, assaying of our drilling, right? So we got a really significant suite of multi-element geochemistry, and that told us a couple of things. That we identified IOCG style alteration, tick, but importantly, it told us about where those alteration signatures sort of sit in the scheme of an IOCG system, right? So if you think about the source of all the activity, the alteration extends out, okay? And depending on what part of that alteration halo, I suppose, that you intersect, you can sort of get an idea of where you might be sitting or drilling in relation to what could be a bigger, richer source of copper. And so we started to get a picture of that, okay? An incomplete picture, but nonetheless, we started to get it. So our next steps at Bali right now is to build on that alteration picture, okay? So right now it's a puzzle with a few pieces of the puzzle on the outline, but like all puzzles, you've got to start working your way in towards the centre. So we've got a very extensive rock sampling program to come to try and complete that picture for the alteration, and that'll be one of the biggest and most important vectors to inform us about where we drill next. Is understanding that. So that's coming. I'm still really bullish on Bali for obvious reasons. I think there's something quite big there that we're only just starting to touch the surface. So that's a process, and we continue on with that process. Nothing's changed there. Okay. Now, whilst we've been doing all that work at Bali. There were some other things that we had to do, and we kind of kicked those programs off at the same time, and that's some geophysical surveys, okay? And the important survey out of all that, I suppose, was the detailed gravity survey. So at the back end of 2022, we flew an airborne electromagnetic survey. Now, what that did was it didn't identify any sort of bullseye EM targets, but it actually highlighted a couple of subtle anomalies which were actually semi-coincident with, again, some other subtle coincident magnetic and gravity signatures that we'd identified from historic data. Okay, and that historic data was probably not the best data you could have, but nonetheless,
still data.
It got us going. So we knew that in order for us to get confidence in those areas, we had to increase the resolution of our information. Okay, so we did a detailed gravity survey, and the outcome of that, I think everybody knows, was one of the targets that we got better resolution on was a target that is called Avalon. Okay, quite a significant gravity anomaly target, and the interpretation of Avalon, the modelling, the geophysical modelling that our consultants did, showed that in 3D, in 3 dimensions, it looked quite like a cylindrical pipe. Okay, and there's only certain things that could possibly represent something like that. Okay, and not just the shape of it, but the strength of the gravity and its location in terms of geology and structure. There were a lot of similarities about that type of gravity anomaly that suggested, well, that looks a bit like Looney carbonatite, which is the gravity anomaly that sits under, the Looney deposit. All right, WA1's Looney resource, world-class niobium resource. Well, that gravity signature was actually quite similar to the signature that we had. Okay, but that's not the only thing it was similar to. It was that signature, the size, the strength was similar to big IOCG systems around Australia and even internationally. So that gravity anomaly could mean anything, but we didn't know what, and we had no other information to validate or confirm what it could be. So the only way to know was to drill it, and we've actually just completed that drilling program, and the market will be aware of the results of that in a matter of weeks.
And do you feel that, I guess, excitement, speculation, and almost people just associating with what that could be got people potentially way too excited than what necessarily was at the time?
Absolutely. So look, if I go back a step, and I talked about the original rock chips at Bali, and no one gave a shit until we actually identified the Avalon anomaly. So, which is, it's odd because, I think Bali could be something quite significant, but that's the reality of it. That's what investors were focused on. And I think the notion or the potential that it could be another Looney, and we saw what happened to WA1, right? They went from pittance to $1 billion entity. Well, the idea that something like that could happen to Rincon brought in a significant amount of interest, and our shares and the volume of trading went through the roof. Now, it allowed us the opportunity to raise money to fund the work that we want to do, but it was still only a target with nothing known about it until we drilled holes, and nothing's still known about it, right? Until we announce something.
Do you feel that, again, the parabolic rise and then, as you said, the panic sell has probably brought a bit of disgruntledness and would you say people asking questions? And I think especially in the small cap end of town, everyone loves you when you're going up, and then the opposite applies as soon as it goes down. There's this very psychological trick that is employed and to see how people go. And based on what you're saying here, there's clearly some points that you urge shareholders to consider at least. And I mean, talking through that, some of them might have lost faith? And what do you say to those that are potentially being swayed by seeing comments online and hearing stuff from people that aren't actually within the company? What do you sort of say to them to just potentially reassure them of what you guys are doing has not changed? It's just a matter of potentially reaching out to you and the team to unpack it.
Nothing's changed for us internally. Okay. We're continuing on the pathway and the strategy that we've always said that we will be doing, and that is drilling our targets to find discoveries, right? And we're doing that, okay? And we're also, as I said before, picking up or starting our new strategy at Laverton. We also always said we were going to be doing that, so that's occurring. But we've still got heaps of targets and heaps of work to do at West Arunta, and that's what we're doing, okay? And we know our next steps at Bali. We're going to know about our next steps at Avalon at the same time everyone else does when we release an announcement in a couple of weeks on the preliminary outcome of that program, okay? But yeah, it's that's where we're at. We're getting on with what we're doing, okay? We've raised a substantial amount of money so that we can actually get going and keep going with our strategies. A lot of the focus has been and still is West Arunta. We've got multiple targets to keep drilling and testing, okay? Again, we'll be informed by some of those next steps on the outcomes of this current program at Avalon and Shiak and K1 and K2. And we're just continue to build on what we've got at Bali. So I've got no doubt that with the ongoing work and the focus that we're putting onto Bali, that something will come out of that in due course. And that's, as a shareholder, that's what you want, right? A company that's actually driven to succeed in discovery. And the only way to do that is to test your targets, okay? And that's what we're doing. That's what we continue to do. So now, in terms of us, what we're doing, okay, so as I said, Bali, we're just about to complete an aeromagnetic survey. That's over Bali. And it's actually over all the rest of our package where Avalon is. And that aeromagnetic information is going to be another layer of information to sharpen up our interpretation of that project, okay? And hopefully identify some new targets, more targets for us to add to the ones that we already got. As I said, Bali is a work in progress. We continue to work through our programs in that hunt for the copper. The other targets, well, they're at the beginning, all right? You do your programs, you work through them, and you either elevate some targets to the next phase or you drop some targets off which don't return anything, right? But you continue to go through the pipeline. That keeps going. That'll keep going. So, and we've got a whole other part of the project that we haven't even started looking at yet, which is promising as well, right? There's still an extension along that Central Australian suture with great structures, great geology that we'll start to look into, getting to these initial phases of collecting geophysical information and geochemical information and reconnaissance to identify areas of interest, identify new targets that keep us going with what we're doing. Okay, and eventually one of them, or two of them, might turn into a discovery. All right, it takes a long time to find discoveries. They don't always occur on the back of one or two drill holes like WA1. And, as I keep saying, WA1, we want to be like that. We'd love to be like that. We haven't had that success on the back of three holes, but we want the same. We want to be able to find a discovery like that and be a next big player in the region. That's why we're there, and that's why we continue to pursue what we're doing. Our other two projects, South Telfer, Laverton, they haven't gone anywhere. Gold price is rising, so we'll start to untap that latent, value in those projects with the gold price going. So we'll go back and we're going to start. We started doing the work at Laverton, okay, and inevitably we'll get back into Telfer when we get a bit more clarity around the Telfer gold mine and what's happening there in terms of ownership and what the new owners of the Telfer gold mine, what their intentions are, and that'll help determine our strategy up there as well. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things to be positive about.
No.
And the main thing is that we've got funding to do what we need to be doing.
So, I mean, encapsulating really key takeaways that you think investors should remember and really sort of take pride in knowing that what you're planning to, what would be some of those takeaways that you'd urge investors and listeners and watchers to remember about Rincon from this chart?
Well, I think the one thing to remember is that we're an exploration company and we're exploring, right? We've got the money, we've got the strategy, and we've clearly got targets that we're testing. Company's actually doing what it's supposed to be doing, exploring, right? So I know where I'd want to put my money in. I mean, that's your best bet in terms of getting some value for your money, is to actually put money into a company that's doing what it says it's going to be doing. And that's us, that's Rincon, right? So I think that's a key positive for any shareholder. And if it's a reason to hold on to your shares, well, good, right? That's the reason. Inevitably, as an exploration company, you get successes and you don't get successes. In fact, you'll get more non-successes than successes. That's just the nature of the game, right? When you're starting at looking for, well, particularly we're not looking at brownfields type exploration. So, the chances of success are low, but nonetheless, it's better than no chance by not actually doing any work.
Yeah.
So you've already got chances by investing in a company that's actually doing the work and actually drilling its targets. All right, so I'll leave that with shareholders and investors. And we're a driven board. Okay, I'm bolstering my technical team. We're getting better at what we do, and we keep building our knowledge base. So that only leads to one thing in the end, and you look at all the history about persistence and good science, and ultimately drilling is what finds your discoveries.